Okay.
All right, Janae, we have to have a talk. We have
Uh-oh.
to come to some conclusion because we keep chasing around. So Janae and I have these really great conversations, and one of the reasons we decided to do this is to sort of share some of these conversations we have. And I think we've come to the point where we have enough respect for each other. Sometimes the conversations are heated, but I appreciate the heat. It comes from a place of I know mutual respect. But one of the things we often disagree on, and I always hesitate even when the word starts forming in on my lips, is the
Uh-oh.
word innovation. What's your
Innovation. I
problem with the
already
word
know what
innovation,
you're gonna
Janae?
say. Peter. Listen, folks. Peter, approaches this work with his design background and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, oh, yeah, innovation, innovative approaches. And I'm like, people, can we just focus on the stuff that's not sexy, that's not innovative? People have been saying it for years, knowing it for years. We just don't implement it because for whatever reason, it's hard to do. Maybe it's uncomfortable to face, but then we just go to, okay, well, I want to see groups do something innovative. And really, it's like, no, no, no. Can we just support people to do the old kind of drudgery type stuff, perhaps, that is effective? So, and Peter is also an idea person. He himself is an innovator, like, idea, 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 idea. I'm like, can we can we just follow through on the five ideas that we talked about last month? That's enough. Let's just get those done. Where are you on the innovation front?
I actually agree with you, Janae, but I should give a little bit of background because I'm sort of like personally identified with, when I went to study design, it was not the first thing that I did professionally. I actually worked on in the classical music world, on the administrative side of classical music world. And if there was ever a sector that needed to be innovated, believe me, it was
Hmm.
classical music is stuck in the 19th century in terms of its performance characteristics, its repertoire, its architecture, et cetera, et cetera. And I had the opportunity to work on a new kind of ensemble. And anyways, worked with design. And, that's really I got interested in design and the potential of design. And for me, when I went to grad school for design, in the back of my head, and I'm confessing this to you, Jeanette, I thought it would make me cool. And obviously it didn't. But being identified with all those cool people that wear the nice clothes and, designer eyewear and all of that. So I'm kind of identified with this idea of design and innovation. It's a sector, it's an identity, a professional identity that I'm sort of identified with. But I'm also, to your point, I'm also really critical of it because I have seen innovation. There's some articles that have been come out over the past several years where innovation actually does more damage than it does good. And I'm also with you in terms of sometimes what we need to do is the hard, mundane, basic work, and that innovation is a distraction. It's a distract. Hey, look here, yeah, yeah. So we're of
It's on
one
the
mind.
record, it's recorded. Future generations will know.
Yeah, and especially, the articles, and this was probably at least a decade ago, the articles I read were looking at some like innovation, folks doing international development work who weren't from those places. And we're going to go innovate in this X country where we are not native, we don't understand the culture, but hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z for them. And then we're going to take a lot of pictures and we're going to put it on a website or put it in a publication and we're going to feel good about ourselves. And I think that innovation, you really have to. And so I think to your point, and I understand that word innovation, absolutely agree. So my professional identification with that word and with that process aside, I totally agree with you in terms of like, hey, it can be as much a distraction as a generator of new ideas and new approaches.
Yeah. Okay. So I usually don't do this, but I am going to plug an episode of my podcast
Yeah, no,
called.
please do.
Okay. So I do have a podcast on my own called I Want to Change the World. And when I was in Ghana, actually, managing this bed and breakfast, I came across this guy who is the volunteer, like anyway, he leads volunteering at the London School of Economics. And I'm like, oh, I went to LSE. And then we connected. And long story short, he wound up on my podcast twice. So shout out to David Coles if you're listening to this podcast. But in any case, in conversation with him, I have an episode called Do's and Don'ts for Doing Good.
Mm.
And he talks exactly about what you're saying. So, David talks about coming to Ghana for the first time, thinking like, oh, they need my help. And I'm, basically how with a white savior complex. And just exactly what you're saying, witnessing again and again people show up to the country with that idea, with that mentality of, oh, you know what, let's do this innovative thing that we've thought of in the West, come here, and then we don't understand why it's not working, why it's not sustainable here. So please check out that episode. Anybody who's thinking about international development, anybody who's not thinking about international development but is tired of that same dynamic playing out again and again. But yeah.
I'm actually going to link those two things together. So my personal identification with innovation, with that kind of, because a lot of times those people are personally identified, are looking for some kind of fulfillment, some kind of agency, some kind of whatever, right? And it's like, well, hey, where can I get that in the greatest contrast, i.e., where I can be most glorified or where I can feel the best about myself?
Go. Yes.
And so it's not about helping those folks, or it's partially about helping, folks that are, I talked about working in communities not our own, right? Whatever that may be. But it's also a way of trying to express and to play out a certain identity. I see that in social impact work a lot. I say that all these people, for whatever reason, I can give some examples, aren't really about the change. They're really about what I call performing an identity. And if your identity is as
Wow.
innovator and designer, right, you're looking for places to perform that identity. And it's not about taking the time to really deeply understand the culture, the context, the people, et cetera, right? It's more about like, in a certain sense, a certain kind of self-gratification. So
Okay, so forgive me, folks, but twice in one episode, I'm gonna plug the latest episode of my podcast actually, where I talk to this liberal rich white guy from California who's doing things in terms of building a movement for social justice that's counterintuitive to, it sounds like, anybody else who's doing that work, or a lot of people who are doing that work. Because when he first started getting into activism, instead of going to a black or brown community like, come on guys, this is what we need to do, I'm down. Instead of doing that, what he did was say, okay, well, I am this wealthy white guy. I'm going to go organize my peers. I'm going to get us together and let other people in this broader movement for social justice, reach their people, do what they need to do. But I'm going to work with my people. And I'm not going to be featured in pictures, where I'm the only white guy standing around a lot of, black people who are doing things and holding myself up as this, like, you know, up, well, I'm look at me with my white man's burden. And I really appreciate that. And I want to call that out because, that can be lacking in our sector sometimes.
well, I think it's an interesting point you raised, Janae, because I think, in both our relationship, I think it's how important it is to really own your identity and own your place, right? If you're going to do serious DEI work, right, you got to, and it's I know it sounds cliche and trite, but you kind of have to own where you are, not just like, oh, this is who I am, but it's like, what does that mean? Where did you come from? What privileges have you had? Et cetera, et cetera. You kind of have to understand where you are and how you function. At least this has been my journey, right? And even in terms of our relationship, that has really come into contrast, and even more so. And really having to be aware of that. Otherwise, you can do all kinds of damage, under the banner of innovation, right? In terms of, or under the banner of, trying to save the world in a certain sense. But that work really belongs with us. And also, you got to check your own ego and, where you need, where your ego gets gratified. Because if it gets gratified, as I've seen with lots of my peers, in terms of being, in websites and magazines and lists of 40 under 40 or whatever the case may be, hey, nothing wrong with that. But you got to understand where you're coming from in your relationship to the broader world, I think, to maintain that right, again, balance of I don't know how else to call it, sort of humility and humility and assertion, for lack of a better term. We have about 40 seconds left, Janae. What do you, any final comments or ideas?
Yeah. So, and we talked about this in another episode, but like even us coming into partnership together, me with this question of how can I partner with someone who has so much more experience, both lived experience and professional experience with me, and then you're also this white guy from a very privileged background. I'm like, I don't want to be his token. I can't be his black east side of Detroit token. And one of the ways that I started to understand that you were legit and that we really could and would be partners in this is when we could have constructive conflict together, like generative conflict together. If we could both show up as our full selves, butt heads, and still respect each other, and no one was on there, oh, but you're this, oh, but I'm that, then I knew, like, oh, this is legit. So kudos to you. And yeah.
I appreciate that. I wouldn't want to work with anyone else right now. We're at time.
All right.